This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. As we continue to mark the 20th anniversary of the opening of the U.S. military prison at Guantanamo, where there are still 39 men being held at the cost of something like more than $13 million per prisoner per year that the U.S. taxpayers are paying for. We're joined now by Mansoor Adayfi, or as he refers to himself, detainee 441. At the age of 18, he left his home in Yemen to do research in Afghanistan. Shortly before he was scheduled to return home, he was kidnapped by Afghan warlords, sold to the CIA for a bounty after the September 11th attacks. He was jailed and tortured in Afghanistan, then transported to the U.S. military prison at Guantanamo in 2002, where he was held without charge for 14 years, many of those years in solitary confinement. In 2016, he was released against his will to Serbia, which he compares to Guantanamo 2.0. He's now the Guantanamo project coordinator at CAGE. We first spoke to him last year after he published his memoir, Don't Forget Us Here, Lost and Found at Guantanamo. We spent the hour with him. He's joining us now from Belgrade. Also still with us is Captain, former Army chaplain at Guantanamo, James Yee. Mansoor wrote a letter to James Yee when Mansoor was still in prison at Guantanamo. Mansoor, welcome back to Democracy Now! It's good to have you back with us. Can you briefly tell your story and what you think is important to raise now, 20 years after Guantanamo was opened, 20 years to this day?
Thank you, Amy, again for having me, and I would like to call you Auntie Amy. You know, I have today important message for Americans. I wish if George W. Bush and his gang was with us today to have that friendly conversation. You know, what is America? You know, from my perspective, America is not the nuclear arsenal. It's not the military power, economic power. It is a set of values that founded by the founding fathers. So if we just look at the core of the problem, just zoom out, we are dealing for 20 years of war on terror or war of terror, 20 years of the Guantanamo, 20 years of war anniversary of Afghanistan, will be also 20 years of war in Iraq. Then we are marking also 1 year of raid on the Capitol Hill. The core of the problem is the Republicans, the one who created destruction outside the country, then brought that destruction to within the country. And, you know, we are dealing with the legacy of Republicans now. We are talking what put us all in that position, what put Americans in that position. It is the legacy of the Republicans. And anyone who can destroy American is the Republican themselves. Not any force, not Al-Qaeda, not terrorism, not any force. It is the Republicans themselves, the way they behave, the way they abandoned American morals and values. So basically, if anyone destroys democracy, are the Republicans themselves, because what we are dealing here, it is the legacy of them for the last 20 years. If we look at the 20 years, what happened there? It is the legacy of Republicans. Now we are dealing for 20 years of Guantanamo. You know, those groups, I believe, and I recommend the Americans, they should be banned to practice any political for the next 20 years. In there, they strip their minds. So 20 years now, we are talking about Guantanamo. We are talking about 20 years of indefinite detention, 20 years of torture, 20 years of injustice, 20 years of failure of an abuse to the American justice system. You know, it's not about the detainees. It's not about the place. It's about us as a human being, as humanity. So today I'm so sad. You know, we are still talking about closing that detention. And even the Democrats, which actually they always clean the mess of the Republicans, they both played political with Guantanamo. The Republican use it for political gain, and the Democrats playing the game of like afraid to close Guantanamo because they're going to be blamed and so on. It needs a decision, a will to close it, and I think Biden can close it. And it is simple: apply justice to Guantanamo.
Mansoor, I wanted to ask you not just about the 39 prisoners who still remain in Guantanamo, but the hundreds like you who were never charged and never convicted of any crime and then were sent not back to their home countries, but to a third country that you had no knowledge of before. How has life been like for those men who are, in essence, stateless at this point?
Yes, releasing from Guantanamo is supposed to be a resettlement agreement between the United States government and the hosting countries. And as Chuck Hagel said in his interview in 2017, that Americans, handed the budget for each country and they demanded from rehabilitation and reintegration. That was supposed to happen, but that never happened. When we were released in Guantanamo, some of us were resettled against our will to countries where we have no knowledge, away from our families, culture, language, and everything. Those countries, when I did my research for my thesis for my university last year about rehabilitation and reintegration of former Guantanamo detainees, I found out there wasn't any kind of rehabilitation and reintegration program. It depends on the hosting countries. Some of these prisoners who relocate in Oman, Qatar, Almania, or Germany or Irlanda, they are doing well. I mean, those countries actually help them and support them to integrate into the society. But countries like Eastern Europe, Serbia, Albania, Kazakhstan, Senegal, and other countries, people face many difficulties and challenges. Some of them still live in limbo, no legal status. Some of them end up dying, losing their life. Some of them are being threatened to be deported. And some of them actually spend for the last 5 years in the United Arab Emirates, one of the worst cases. After release from Guantanamo to United Arab Emirates, finding themselves spending 5 years. They were released just 2 months ago after they were hospitalized from coronavirus. The United Arab Emirates, they didn't want anyone to die there. So they just shipped them to Yemen without any coordination with their families or government or lawyers or NGOs. And when the released prisoners arrived in Yemen, some of them in less 24 hours, they were kidnapped by Houthi and imprisoned for at least 2 months. And we have been working for those cases for the last month. At least 5 of them has been now kidnapped by the militia. And we are trying to free them. We freed, I think, 3 so far because we are working with case to track the case, to communicate with our lawyers in the United States, with the ICRC, and they can communicate with the militia in Yemen. So basically, we live in Guantanamo 2.0. No legal status. Some of us cannot travel, live in the stigma of Guantanamo, viewed by the hosting countries as a terrorist, as killers. And we also...
Mossam, I wanted to ask you, we have only about 2 minutes left, but one of the things that many Americans say, well, they weren't convicted, but they were really terrorists. How many of the more than 700 men who were released, to your knowledge, ended up going into some kind of organizations of terrorism or to seek to attack the United States again, from what you can tell?
Or if you could answer that. Mansoor, if you could answer that.
Oh, sorry. Basically, if you go to the report of Seton Hall University and ACLU, that 86% of the prisoners Guantanamo were there. Interrogation. Even George W. Bush himself released around over 500 prisoners. They found out it was a mistake. Darren Rumsfeld himself, he said most of detainees Guantanamo were dirt farmers. I'm talking about the statements by the officials and American institutes. So when they say a terrorist, we starved at Guantanamo for justice, asking why we were there. So I was told I was a terrorist at Guantanamo because my behavior within the detention, I wasn't uncooperative. I wasn't because we used to protest for stopping the torture, the hunger strike. That were classified as terrorist. And specifically,
we have 10 seconds, Mansoor.
In my case, for example, I was sold as Al-Qaeda commander. By 2015, they said, Uncle, if he actually joined Al-Qaeda. So basically, there is no basis whatsoever. It just, they try to market their narrative about Guantanamo.
Mansoor, we have to leave it there, but I want to encourage people to watch The Hour with Mansoor Adayfi, who was imprisoned without charge for 14 years. And thank you so much to James Yee. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Wear a mask. Stay safe.